13 years old, so it's not a big industry. It's not a very old industry. It's quite young. I still call us as a startup, because even after 13 years, we're still trying to figure out how to help the farmer, which is where the original intent of this market was. So for the first 13 years, one of the one of the accusations that has been leveled at markets like us and at organizations which talk about agricultural markets is that have they really benefited the farmer, and have they really increased the gains and the realizations to the farmer? And the honest answer is directly no. We've had, and this is not just about exchanges, but even the physical markets in India. So there are about in excess of 7,000 spot markets in the country, which are called as mandis or APMCs, Agricultural Produce Marketing Committees. There are 7,500 of these across the country, and they're all distinct, small, standalone markets. And I would venture to say that they are, dysfunctional markets, although they operate. But in terms of bringing efficiency to the farmer and giving a good market access to the farmer, they have not delivered on the promise that they set out to. So in general, the whole market access has been a missing piece for the farmer. So the farmer is a very unique businessman, where he is he buys. He buys wholesale stuff, and when he comes out to sell, he sells in an extremely fragmented retail market, so which is and does not capture, and through a range of intermediaries does not end up capturing any value at all. And that's a big sort of pity and a big challenge that we need to solve. So about a year and a half ago, we set out to solve this challenge. And I'll just talk about some of the the journey and the background we have made in terms of how we have solved the problem, or we are looking to solve the problem. We've not solved the problem at all, but how we are trying to solve the problem and approach giving great market access to the farmer. Fundamentally, we've started with a thesis saying that we need to give the farmer the access to markets, and obviously digital markets, because that's they are the most easy and cost-effective ways of accessing markets. How do we give an access to the farmer, market access to the farmer across three axes? One is the time axis. The second is the grade axis, because an average farmer in India is a small and marginal farmer, and he or she produces agricultural produce of different grades and different varieties across the country. How do we give access to the farmer a market which across different types of grades the market access can be provided? And the third is location. So across the three axes, so the time axis, the grade axis, and the location axis, and if we are able to create a whole system around giving the farmer an access to digital markets, interoperable markets across the time, grade, and location axis, then I think we'll have come a long way in terms of solving this problem. So, as I said, we started this problem, approaching this problem about a year and a half ago, and we've come a long way. But I mean, this is just really footsteps, few footsteps in a very, very, very long journey, and hopefully technology can accelerate that journey and make it much more time effective, for the farmer. So we've got three sort of models that I'd like to talk about, and I'd like to sort of draw up reference for this group that is there. One is the NCDX model, which is of giving access to agricultural derivatives to the farmer. Derivatives sounds like a very complex instrument, and it is in many ways a complex instrument. But how do we give access to the farmer to a very simplified version of a derivatives product? And we've been, I would say, early days, but reasonably successful in proving the concept. In this financial year, and these are all numbers of this financial year, we've had 18,000 farmers who have actually sold their produce through the electronic markets that NCDX operates across the country. And this has been 9,000 tons of produce, which is very, very small, but it's a sort of real stuff across 6 crops and 3 states in the country. So this is a small experiment, and I'll sort of talk more about that if there is interest during the Q&A. But this is one access to the farmer, and in our experience, the farmers have got at least 15 to 20% more than the prevailing price in the physical markets when they have come and sold their produce on futures. So this is now the direct benefit of futures markets beginning to accrue to farmers. The second model is that of a subsidiary. We have a 100% subsidiary of NCDX called NCDX E-Markets Limited, NEML, which runs and digitizes spot markets. So futures markets complement spot markets. Spot markets are the sort of the bedrock of market access. And the experiment we did, which is no longer an experiment, but we started an experiment 4 years ago in a small place called Gulbarga in Karnataka in India, where we set out to digitize the market, the physical markets where farmers bring truckloads of farm produce to the APMCs, to the mandis, physical markets, and try and get a decent value for their produce. And as I mentioned earlier, very dysfunctional markets. So we started a pilot in 2011, 2012 to digitize the Gulbarga market and try and see if we can create a modern market, a modern and a model market, and give access to the farmer. That experiment was highly successful, great benefits to the farmers. The state government of Karnataka got very excited about this initiative and asked us to form a joint venture with them, which is now called Rashtriya E-Market Services, which is creating a digital agri-market for the state of Karnataka. And that is now live. It's now 2 years in existence, and this has digitized and automated all the 155 physical, arcane, dysfunctional markets that existed in the state of Karnataka, and they've all been digitized. And I'd still say they're version 1 of the digitization effort. There is lots of more work that needs to be done in terms of how do we get grading to be done at a cost-effective manner. How do we use some of the technologies that have been talked about by sort of the esteemed panelists and get sort of grading and assaying for the farmer in an extremely cost-effective manner. Upload them on digital markets so that the buyer can actually see what kind of quality is being sold or being tendered by the farmer. But nevertheless, this market has benefited 15 lakh farmers, 1.5 million farmers have actually participated in this market across Karnataka. So fairly scalable model. It's obviously the numbers speak for themselves. 2.8 million tons of farm produce has been traded across 20 crops, and now it is operating across 6 states in the country. What started off in a small market called Gulbarga, then went on to Karnataka, and now operating in 6 states. I'll then talk about ENAM. ENAM is the pet project, one of the pet projects of the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi. He launched this market a year ago, which is called the Electronic National Agri-Market Initiative. And this took inspiration from the work that NCDX did in Karnataka. In fact, the Economic Survey of Government of India 2014 referenced this pilot project in Karnataka, and this inspired the Government of India to create a national agri-market. Early days, very, very early days, but 1.6 lakh farmers have traded on the national agricultural market with 1.5 million tons, 1.5 lakh tons of farm produce has been sold across 69 crops and 10 states. So this is a small silent revolution that is currently going on in terms of creating digital market access to farmers. And we are quite excited because this is an area where very little work has been done. A lot of work in India as well as in most other countries tends to be in the pre-harvest where input management, productivity. So in any agricultural conference and seminar that you go to, you will hear most of the topics talked about in the area of inputs. And we believe that the post-harvest aspect has been ignored, and a lot more work needs to be done to bring that assuming that the farmer has used all the technology to produce effectively, efficiently, and highly productively great produce, but the access to markets is then frittered away through a chain of middlemen, who then capture that value, and the farmer ends up getting nothing, and consumer ends up paying a lot. So creating efficient digital markets is really sort of the next milestone as far as digital pathways for the agricultural industry is concerned. The other thing I'd like to just talk about is digitization of warehouses. And a lot more work needs to be there. So if we want to encourage farmers to come and bring their produce to a warehouse and store that produce in a warehouse until they get the right price and then sell it at the right price. The trust of goods stored in a warehouse needs to be fixed. That issue needs to be fixed. So another experiment that we started some time ago and which is also proven quite successfully is to how do you create trust in goods that are stored in warehouses? Because there has been traditional, in India, scandals and scams of goods that have disappeared from warehouses. We had the NSEL scam in 2013, which really sort of brought agricultural financing and the skepticism of commodity markets was reached an all-time high. Last year, they were reported about 1 million tons of wheat went missing in Food Corporation of India warehouses. And so how do we fix that problem? So we worked with a small company in a city called Pune to figure out radio frequency identifying tags, low-cost RFID tags to be put on every bag that is stored in a warehouse. And the initial cost estimates that the company came out with were prohibitive. They were, in the range of, $1 per tag. So you imagine if you have got thousands and thousands of bags in a particular warehouse, you're talking of thousands of dollars just to tag a particular bag and give trust to the banker who's lending against that stock. We drove that cost down through innovation, and we have now reached a stage of 10 rupees per RFID tag, which is becoming affordable. It's still not affordable, but becoming affordable. The beauty of that is that these RFID tags can then emit signals, and in real time, you can track the sanctity of the bag of grain that is stored in a warehouse, and a banker sitting in Mumbai or Delhi or in whichever part of the country can in real time satisfy himself or herself that the goods that I have financed for a farmer are truly existing in that warehouse and they have not been pilferaged and they have not been taken away through theft or whatever, and he's just financing just sort of nothing in the warehouse. And once we solve that problem and give confidence of goods that are stored in a warehouse, and how do you track digitally goods that are stored in a warehouse until we go eventually to silos and stuff like that, which we are quite some time away. The whole financing value chain will start, I think, to explode and give financing access to the farmer. So that's another experiment that I thought I'd mention, which is progressing quite well. The last thing I'd like to mention is how we are working with governments, state governments in India, to help farmers sell their produce to the state governments. Traditionally, state governments have bought produce from the farmers for a variety of schemes for creating buffer stock, through the minimum support price program, social welfare schemes like midday meal schemes, and a variety of other schemes where governments procure from farmers. And they've been traditionally done through intentionally releasing a small ad in a small newspaper in a regional language, such that only 3 or 4 suppliers will constantly win that business and supply to the government, and farmers would never actually supply to the government. So how do we digitize the whole auction process, and how do we, through that exercise of digitization, how do we give a small farmer the ability to sell to the government for its social welfare schemes and for sort of a buffer stock management scheme? And we now work with almost 10 states across the country to help them procure from farmers directly for a variety of their schemes. And these are small and marginal individual farmers who participate in these schemes, where they participate in electronic auctions, and they are paid even far before demonetization started, paid money into their bank accounts, and within standardized settlement processes and settlement cycles, and that has benefit of a variety, multiple benefits to all the stakeholders. One, benefit to the farmer, obviously, because he has direct access to the government as a large customer with prompt payments and stuff like that, but also to the government in terms of the cost of procurement. Instead of procuring from the same 3 or 5 middlemen who just colluded amongst themselves and gave extraordinarily high prices to the government, this is a retail farmer who's then selling his produce through digital access of markets to these states. So the cost of procurement to the states came down substantially, and that's now spreading through word of mouth, and many states in this country are benefiting from this exercise. So I'm going to wrap up my sort of a brief talk about digital markets as part of this program by saying that a lot of work is being done, long way to go, and we need technologies like that have been talked about today, and the participation and wholehearted support of all of you in this conference to embrace, adopt, adapt, and take those messages to the farmers. So the proof of the pudding is always, are we communicating enough to the farmer? So to that extent, the last sort of piece of the puzzle was about how do we educate the farmers at scale. And we partnered with the government of India, and we produced a show, and we are producing a show which is run every Sunday on the national television network called Doordarshan. And this program is not like the traditional Doordarshan program that one must have been exposed to or experienced. This is high quality programs of the likes that you see on BBC or CNN, but designed for farmers. It's called Mandi.com. As the name suggests, it's got a bit of old and bit of new in that name. And every Sunday we telecast this program, and we educate farmers about modern marketing techniques in order to turn the farmer into a modern businessman with access to digital markets. So that's really sort of trying to give you a sense for what's going on in this country today as far as digital access to farmers are concerned. Long way to go. The challenge is yet not, the problem is yet not solved, but I think a beginning has been made, and I look forward to hearing more from you about this progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you indeed, Mr. Shah, for that amazing expose. And I excuse myself from the post of moderator with good reason. My co-panelists have been extremely economical with the use of time, and we have 15 minutes for questions. And if I might take the liberty of asking the first question, and hope to encourage lots of questions from the floor. This one's for Mr. Shah. Tell me, while all these programs are going on and we're using Doordarshan and so on, what is the level of absorption of this communication, which means from conceptualization or being communicated with to actually transacting in these formats digitally? What's the kind of absorption that has happened, adoption, so to speak?
Slow. I mean, the honest answer is very, very slow, but happening. So, I mean, the good news is that we are encouraged by the fact that it's happening. So after the Mandi.com show that's telecast thrice every Sunday, we get, when in the first few programs, and we have now run 52 weeks, more than 52 weeks. It's been running for more than a year now. In the initial days, and we've got a toll-free hotline for the farmer to call after the program. So we used to get 2 or 3 calls after that program. We now get 200, 300 calls after each of that telecast. So 3 times Sunday. That means you get about 600 calls from across the country on very, very different aspects of challenges that the farmer faces. And the numbers that I talked about are real transactions that farmers have done. So this is not, this is not sort of, these are real numbers of real human beings, real farmers who have transacted on these platforms. But nevertheless, it has been slow. There's no question. The challenge ahead is far more significant.
Wonderful, absolutely. And I'd like to put up my hand and we do, at EM3, we do a lot of farmer goshtis, about 4 or 5 a day. And perhaps, if I might put up our hand to say, we put up our television sets at these goshtis for these communications to be discussed in a goshti so that the absorption could be even faster. And I got an idea just by listening to you to make the glue even better. Open to the floor, please. If you just introduce yourself. There are people with mics. And I see a hand up there. This is fascinating stuff.
Hello, sir. Sir, my name is Raja Bakshi from National Institute of Agriculture Marketing, Jaipur. Sir, my question is, in my perception, the major constraints for adopting this IoT or the satellite irrigation system, the literacy rate of farmers in India. Because we are still struggling to connect the farmers to APMCs and made internet transactions. how you can imagine that farmers can use this technology very easily. And the one more constraint is the language problem. So every state has having different languages. The only 22 official languages are recognized. There are 652 different mother tongues in India. How can you approach that grassroots level of farmers with your technology, with this international language? And one more thing, your technology needs electricity a whole day. And practically in village areas, the farmer is getting 2 to 3 hours of electricity that to water his field for motors. Then my suggestion is you have to involve solar harvesting panels in your technology to keep your technology active 24/7. What's your opinion regarding my perception?
Who is this directed at? Would you like anybody particular to answer your question?
Sir,
Please do.
anyone from panel can answer.
To your last question, you should talk to Solchip. They have a solution for your last question. So they provide IoT system without need to connect it to the network, so to the electricity network. I mean, what I say, your comments are very true. However, there are people working on solutions, and for example, Solchip company sitting here give you system that using solar harvesting, independent IoT systems.
Yeah, so if I can,
Please.
if I can add to that, so again, exactly for the reasons you mentioned, we tried to develop a solution that would not need on-ground sensors, electricity, or connectivity. Okay, connectivity and electricity are one of the main inhibitors to penetration of those technologies, and that's why we decided that we would not rely on those. So again, if you take satellite information or hyper-local weather data from online services, you don't need any of those. So also, we are spending a lot of efforts on training farmers to use drip irrigation. We have local people on the ground, agronomists in every state almost in India to do that. But for that particular application, we try to do it training free because otherwise we cannot reach the cost that we planned to target on. So it should be a really simple, easy to use application that everybody who has a smartphone, internet access of any kind can use. And the last question, when you use for languages, when you use a cloud-based service, when you don't need to download any software, the ability to move to multiple languages is really becoming very, very easy. And of course, we plan to gradually offer it in all possible languages, but it's not complicated to do that when you have a cloud-based software as a service application.
There's a response from the floor itself. Would you pass a mic here?
I just want to add that indeed we all agree that one of the limiting factors to implement technologies is the energy. So we provide it by solar energy in the level of basic of the census and the communication. You can send the data from there. And all the way it can come to the cloud. As a matter of fact, today you're using a gateway that need electricity or can be used also by solar. So this is one of the solutions. And another thing that I have to say that, of course, everything cannot be deployed everywhere and anywhere. So things that in each, to my opinion, corps that are, let's say, more expensive, they are adopting such cuts canton in the beginning, but then everything will come to everybody if we prove that with the technology we do increase the yield and of course, this is for all the farmers. Thank you.
If I may add something here, even in case the technological barriers are solved, these that you mentioned and the ones I presented in my speech earlier on, there is still the human factor that needs to be treated rightfully. And in this case, we really need to educate and train the farmers. It's not only to educate them to be able to efficiently use the new technologies, which takes a lot of effort. We need to raise awareness and change their mentality. I know that in Greece and in most Mediterranean countries, and I'm sure that similar is the case in India, farmers, mainly small farmers, are not that trustful towards new technologies. They are hesitating to adopt the new technologies, even they're not sure of the benefits they will provide to them. We have realized this fact several years now in Europe, and we have kind of solved it for the Greek community of farmers. There are advisory services offered throughout the country to all farmers. This is coordinated by a non-government body. Farmers pay a very small subscription on a yearly basis, and they enjoy full support of specialists and agronomists that support them in the adoption of new technologies on the site. And there are centers that support this throughout the country, hundreds of centers, and this is definitely one of the ways that can promote the adoption of new technologies, ICT technologies, IoT in agriculture.
Thank you. And from a small observation from my side, and more questions welcome, please. And to your point of hesitation of technology use, I think that's true. However, I have yet to meet a farmer as canny and as sharp as the Indian farmer. If you can show benefit and demonstrate benefit. In Hindi, we say, "Jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai." What you can see, you buy. You show me the benefit, I'll buy it. And the Indian farmer is particularly risk-taking. So we do have a different set of dynamics at work. Next question, please. And after that, yourself.
Hello. Yeah, hi, Samir. I have a question for you. So, with regards to digital connects, market connects, what is that you're planning in terms of quality assessment and the challenges around the payments that the people face?
Good question.
So I think I'll talk about the payments first. The payments is not such a big problem. I mean, it is a practical problem, but it's not a problem that hasn't been solved. So, most farmers have, so I'll give you an example of Karnataka. Most farmers that have registered on our platform have a bank account, and the technology is very easily able to give payments to the accounts. The problem is not about the technology. The problem is that when we enabled it, we switched it on direct payment to banks. We switched it on for 4 or 5 markets out of the 150 markets in Karnataka. And we had strikes and protests from the traders. And the traders are all politically backed, they're politically motivated, and they did not want that to happen. Because the moment you take the power of payment from the trader to a system, the trader loses the power to negotiate with the farmer so the challenge is really the trader and how do we handle that. So that's the challenge, but the technology itself is not, it's been solved. Coming to quality is a problem, and we are trying to experiment with things like how do you take an image on a smartphone of a grain. So you take an image on the smartphone and then upload that to a server, and then based on back-tested data, the server will then look at previous such images and assign a grade or quality to that, and then do it on that basis. Unproven, so the grade and quality problem needs to be solved, and there are several other things that you can't take a picture of. You can't take a picture of moisture, for example. So we need sensors and other kind of things need to be integrated into that. So that quality problem at scale hasn't been solved. The payments problem has been solved. It's more about tackling the middleman and the trader and getting that entity to sort of buy into the payments problem is really where the challenge is.
So actually, my supplementary follow-up. So basically, are you planning anything for the entrepreneurship development in this particular? For example, like connecting the logistics, so that the produce can be bought directly from the farm rather than from the markets. I see that there is a lot of limitation around the APMC acts and then the directly buying stuff. So are you also planning a holistic ecosystem around connecting the digital? Because I recently come with an example of onions. In Karnataka, it was sold at around 5 rupees. And in Kerala, it was 12 to 13 rupees. So, but farmers were not